Hello and welcome back to NEEF Fine Art Studio. Today I want to talk about granulation in pigments and how to use them for effect. We will test three different mediums: liquid charcoal, lunar black and granulation medium. I will be using BaoHong watercolor paper, 100% cotton, 300 GSM rough surface. A rough surface is best surface to explore granulation for the effect. For this experiment, I'm dividing the paper into three parts and I'm drawing three identical sketches to compare later, and I will be using three different mediums. This is an impromptu streetscape. I have a two-story house on the left and a car next to it on the right. All will be against the sunlight to have a large dark shape to test granulation. In other words, to have a large objects in shadow. These are the three mediums that we will be testing today: liquid charcoal by Nitram, lunar black by Daniel Smith, and granulation medium by Windsor and Newton. Before we start the sketches, I want to show you in the little areas under the drawings that I left blank how to work with these mediums. First, let's try liquid charcoal. The trick here is to grab almost pure pigment straight from the tube. The water in the brush will be enough to dilute it a little to make it easier to apply to the paper. If you dilute it with water on the palette, in the similar way you work with watercolor, it will be way too light and transparent, as it doesn't have any color in it. It's just particles of charcoal mixed with gum arabica. Next step is the most important part if you want to achieve granulating effect. You spray it with water, very generously, and let it be. Another important aspect is to have your board at an angle. This will help with gravity to move the paint downward. Now I'm going to apply water underneath the paint and see how quickly the paint goes into the water. It looks like it stays put and doesn't really move too much into the water. And this is something to remember and to take a note of. This is definitely different to typical watercolor. Watercolor instantly goes into the water, especially at this angle. It was around approximately 45-degree angle. And this pigment, liquid charcoal, stays pretty much where it was. And now we're going to apply same tricks to lunar black to achieve granulation. And this is the pigment that I used for one of my recent demonstrations. So if you want to practice it on a full-scale painting in real time, painting along with me, please find me on Patreon. The link will be in the upper right corner and also in the description down below. So first, pigment straight from the tube. This is very thick, as you can see. The only water I used that was on the brush for this. And now I'm going to dilute this with water on my palette and I apply it to the right part of the testing paper. Now we're going to spray it with water very generously. Leave it be for a few seconds. And now I'm going to leave the board so water travels quicker, and I've got just water on my brush and I'm painting with this very watery mixture. I'm grabbing more water on the brush and applying it underneath. So as you can see, the pigment travels really quickly and there is pretty much no separation between the diluted mixture and the water that I used at the bottom. And now I'm going to do the same for a mixture of ultramarine blue and granulation medium. First, pigment with granulation medium. So this is a pure pigment, there is no water. And now I'm painting with a very weak mixture of lots of water, a bit of ultramarine and granulation medium. Now I'm going to spray this with a spray bottle and leave the board and leave it be for a second. Like that, and now I'm applying water underneath the painted area. Surprisingly, the ultramarine blue with granulation medium didn't flow into the water even with the lifted board. Usually, if you have a consistency between coffee and milk, so anything that forms bead would definitely run very quickly towards the bottom of the wet area, and even cream consistency, when it's a little bit thicker, will still run but a bit slower. But surprisingly, the mixture of ultramarine and granulation medium stays on its place, so definitely something to note again. And definitely, if you want to avoid it, if you want the paint spread into the wetter area, I would probably recommend adding more water into the mixture. So instead of having just ultramarine and granulation medium, I would add a bit of water in this mixture. Now let's dry this and see how they look when they dry. So this is the result. All look pretty good, but I think Lunar Black and Ultramarine with Granulation Medium look a little bit more textured. And another thing to note, Lunar Black and Ultramarine dried under the use of hairdryer in approximately a couple of seconds. Then I spent another minute drying liquid charcoal, and it's still wet, so it definitely stays wet for longer. Now let the fun begin. Let's do the sketches. So first I'm going to do the first wash, so I'm going to add a bit of color to the background for the sky and for the earth. I'm starting with a mix of yellow ochre and applying it to the sky, and now I'm mixing cobalt blue with a bit of yellow and red and applying it to the rest of the sky. And I'm trying to keep the pattern pretty similar for all these three sketches. The sky is finished. Now I'm going to paint the earth, and the earth will be very simple horizontal brush strokes for the distant background, and a bit of ultramarine blue neutral tint and cobalt blue for the middle ground, and then more neutral tint for the very foreground. And now I'm going to add same mixture that I had for the very foreground to the cars. And this is basically for the soft shadow, because these cars will be still painted with the second wash, but it's very nice when you add a bit of shadow as a first wash, because it creates nice and soft edges. Now the first wash is done, so we're going to dry it, and then when it's dry, we're going to paint our second wash, and we're gonna test the granulation. The paper is dry now, and we're ready for our second wash. Firstly, I want to pre-wet the area of the buildings with yellow, and this is because neither liquid charcoal nor Lunar Black have any color in it, so I really want a bit of color underneath these pigments. So I'm adding a bit of yellow and a bit of blue to the water, and this is pretty much a tea consistency, so there is lots of water and just a touch of paint. And now, while this is wet, I'm going to grab a different brush, liquid charcoal straight from the well. This is pure pigment, and I'm going to start painting the shape of the building. As you can see, I'm very rough with application. I'm not actually trying to paint any windows or doors or anything like that. This is just an approximation of a building with some suggestions of levels and windows and some details. And same goes to the car. Very quick suggestion of a car. So basically a little line for the roof and a square for the back of the car. Now the most important part is spraying this with lots of water. And let's assume it's a wet day, so let's add a bit of reflection to the ground. Otherwise it looks way too empty. The reflection for the car is done. Now I'm adding a bit of a reflection for the building, and just a few details, few dots and lines here and there. It will make some sense of details. I'm going to spray some more because it doesn't look like the granulars moving on the paper. And while it's painting itself, we're going to start working with Lunar Black. Same process, I'm going to start with a very weak mixture of yellow and red, and then I'm going to add a little bit of blue for the background. Now I'm grabbing Lunar Black straight from the well, and start painting the shape of the building. I'm a little bit more careful with the top outline of the building because this what tells us that this is a building, and the rest of the building, it doesn't really matter. I'm trying to suggest a few levels, so I'm leaving a bit of a gap in between the levels. So this is a second level, this is a third level, something like that, and then third level, the ground level, and then we're gonna suggest a few windows or something like that, and this is the side of the building, maybe a few details at the top as well. I want to mention that today I'm using NEEF Alvaro Castagnet brush, Pure Squirrel. This is brush number 2, and this is perfect for work like that, for painting large shapes at the same time as painting small shapes and details, because this brush has such a good point. Now I'm going to connect it to the car. This is the car, and I think I'm gonna spray this. And now I'm going to add the windows. Okay, a few more windows at the bottom, something like that. And then the reflection. And maybe a few details, vertical details, similar to what we did for the first sketch. And now the granulation medium mixture. Basically same start, a bit of yellow and blue for the background. But now instead of using ultramarine blue, I'm going to add a bit of burnt sienna to the mixture to make a grey out of it. So this is a mixture of ultramarine, burnt sienna and granulation medium. And now I'm applying it to the paper. I'm painting the shape. I'm starting with the outline. And as you can see, this mixture is a little bit more liquid. It interacts much better with the pre-wet surface and flows down the paper much easily. It feels almost like I don't need to spray it with water, but this is a trick. This is definitely a trick because we just did a test, as you can see down the bottom, that ultramarine, and we sprayed it with water, but it still didn't move much. So even if it looks liquid, it doesn't mean it will granulate. So we will definitely need to spray it with water to have a maximum effect of granulation. So the main shape is finished. Now I'm going to add the car and a few details here and there, and the reflection under the car as well. And then I'm gonna spray this, and we will dry, and we're gonna see the finished result when it's dry. So here I am trying to dry these 3 sketches, and I'm facing exactly the same issue. The mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna and granulation medium, and also the Lunar black sketch, they dried very quickly, but I spent forever trying to dry the liquid charcoal sketch. And even when I thought it should be dry, I still had the areas of wetness, especially for the windows where I had a couple of layers wet on wet, and the dome as well. And even if we look at the bottom sketch, there is still a little area that is darker, much darker, and it means it's still a little bit wet. If I compare these 3 sketches, these 3 pigments, the liquid charcoal looks like a faded film. It has an effect of faded film, so it's a little bit more atmospheric and not as contrasty in comparison to, for example, Lunar Black. Lunar Black has the most tonal value difference, almost from black to almost white, and definitely has a very, very nice granulated texture. But the problem with these 2, they are black. They don't have color. This is where granulation medium comes handy. And I believe if you use granulating colors such as ultramarine, cerulean blue, and other, you will achieve a beautiful granulation texture. Maybe the granulation isn't that dramatic in comparison to liquid charcoal and Lunar Black, but I believe it still has enough texture to create an interest in your darks. If you've never tried granulating pigments before, I would definitely recommend giving it a go. But please don't expect incredible results immediately. You may need to practice a couple of times. This is all for today. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something new. Until my next video, bye!